Hello and welcome to the recap. I'm Justin with NRN, the Noble Racing Network. Welcome. It's good to have you. Good to see you. Thank you so much for listening. Lots to talk about this Mother's Day weekend. Lots of racing on and all around the world, and we'll get to most of it. But we start in Kansas with Saturday night's NASCAR Cup race under the lights. Perhaps a preview of what we can expect in Charlotte because of the changing track conditions going from day to night. And wouldn't you know, I expect Harvick to do well, and well, he did well. Harvick picks up his 100th win of the season and makes it 2 in a row. He won at Dover, and now he took the checkered flag in Kansas. Yes, Kevin Harvick was able to win the race, but you know, he's back on that winning streak again. And it's been since, Jeff Gordon, 1997, since a driver won 4 in a row. Harvick got close to it, as well as Kyle Busch. So can Harvick turn it around and maybe win 2 more in a row? I don't know. If anyone's going to do it, I expect him to do it. But, he didn't dominate the race, which I expected. I expected him to kind of do what he did in Dover, but he didn't. In fact, he didn't even win any of the first 2 stages. Ryan Blaney would pick up the first stage win. It was clean and green for that stage. Not a whole lot to talk about in that one. There was a competition caution at lap 30 because it had rained that morning. It seems like it rains every weekend now in one of these NASCAR things. We're having like European weather, It's just during the weekend it's going to rain at some point during the race. So that would make it a green track, but there were multiple grooves as that track started to rubber up, and the high line certainly seemed to be the best way to go. It seems like more guys made up ground on the high line than they were down low. But I'll say this, Clint Bowyer and Kyle Larson were very fun to watch. Both of those guys had to start in the rear. Larson, he spun in qualifying, so he would have to change his tires because you have to start on the tires you qualify, and you can't start on flat spotted tires, so he had to change his tires. That would send him back to the rear of the field. And Bowyer, he couldn't get his car to pass inspection, so to the rear it was for the first stage for both of those guys, and both were in the top 10 by the end of the first stage. Hell, before the first competition caution at lap 30, they were both in the top 10. And it was Larson, though, who looked like he could put up the biggest fight for the win, and he's in a Chevy. Larson continues to be the best of the Chevy teams, but that was fun to watch, watching those 2 guys pick their way through the field and get into the top 10 by lap 30. That was just brilliant. And he'd show it in stage 2, talking about Larson, because Larson would get the win in stage 2. Blaney was not able to win the first stage again, the second stage, so Larson would get the win, and it was looking like there were going to be 3 cars in the hunt, and that was Larson, Harvick, and Ryan Blaney. But we were still caution-free to this point, or at least there were no incidents on the track. And all that would change in stage 3. In fact, 2 of the top contenders I just mentioned got into one another to bring out a caution. Blaney was trying to side draft Kyle Larson, and Blaney got into Larson, and that would cut his tire down and put him into the wall and give some damage to Larson's car. Blaney would not be able to finish the race. He would take the blame for that. Could not believe it that Blaney was out of the race after being so strong and leading so many laps, and Larson with damage. The top 2 contenders right there with problems. Then you had young William Byron had a huge crash that almost looked like what Almirola did last year, that fractured his spine. However, Byron landed on top of Ryan Newman. And you know what? I was actually talking with my buddy Sandro Duelis of SRL, and he pointed out a fact to me that a car is always landing on top of Ryan Newman. And it's just funny to me because I hadn't thought of that before, but it does seem like cars are always landing on top of Ryan Newman when they get airborne. Jamie McMurray this year at Talladega, when he had that bad crash, landing on top of Ryan Newman. Just seems like it's always happening. But Harvick, he would actually skate by that crash just by a little bit. Most luckiest dude on the planet. I've never seen someone who could get out of stuff and just doesn't have stuff happen to him, was able to miss that crash, so he stays in the race. And now up front, though, would be Logano and Truex. They decide not to pit. They throw some strategy at it. Neither one of those guys, they were running in the top 10, but they hadn't seen the front, so they throw some strategy at it. And that put Truex up there in the lead for the first time that night. And he hadn't been happy with his car at all, so it was good to... I like making moves like that. You're never going to win the race just doing the same thing with the leaders. You have to switch up something, and put yourself in good positions. So Truex would do that, and with 10 laps to go, he found himself in the lead. He'd get a great restart, pull out over Logano, but Kevin Harvick would come through the field using that top line from deep in the top 10, and he'd pass Truex on the very last lap. As they took the white flag going into turn 1, coming out of turn 2, Harvick would be the leader. And Harvick would get the win at Kansas. Second win in a row. He's the hottest driver in the field right now, and Stewart Haas, it is their year, man. But it was a pretty good race, though. Very quick. Very quick race. That 400 miles went by fast. And with the cars doing well over 200 miles per hour, it's going to click off some laps, especially when you have those long green flag runs mixed in there as well. That just added to the pace. But, it wasn't quite a snooze. Like I said, Harvick didn't run away with it like we saw in Dover, because I was not happy with the Dover race at all. The Dover race, to me, that was just awful. This race wasn't that way. We had some competition up at the front. Blaney was up there. Larson was up there. Larson was looking good in that Chevy, too. Hendrick is still struggling, but Larson at Chip Ganassi has got something figured out. And it's just the 42, because Jamie McMurray, his teammate, isn't as quick as Kyle Larson is. So that 42 team specifically has cracked something on that Chevy that the other teams haven't. And it's only a matter of time before he gets a win. But I don't know what it is about a track like Kansas. It always produces these huge and violent wrecks. That wreck we saw last night at the end of the race, that was a big one. And we had seen one very similar to that just last year. Of course, like I said, it left Eric Almirola injured. Luckily, Byron was okay. Landing on top of Ryan Newman kind of broke his fall. He didn't slam back down on the racetrack. But I don't know what it is about Kansas, because it's very odd. Given the shape and scope of the Kansas racetrack, it's not that different than Vegas or Chicago, and both of those tracks are just absolutely boring. But we now put all the points aside, and we go all-star racing next weekend from Charlotte. I won't be at that race, but I'll be at the Coke 600 with my good friend Kels Walker going to her first race. So stay tuned to social media for that, because we're going to be doing a special thing. Her first NASCAR race. We're going to be documenting all of that, and I'll be giving you live coverage from the track. So be sure to tune into NRN social media sites like Facebook. Look us up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to see firsthand from the Coke 600, so that'll be fun. And we're going to actually have something a little different next weekend for the All-Star race. They're going to restrictor plates, and I have no idea what to expect out of these restrictor plates at a track like that. I honestly have no idea. I am looking forward to seeing it, just to see if it works. I remember one time at Charlotte, I went to the Bojangles pole night years ago. I think it was my first year in college, which has now been, 10, 11 years ago. That's how old I am. And I remember after qualifying, they kept talking about, stay for the Thunder cars. You have to see the Thunder cars. And we didn't know what a Thunder car was, and I don't think it ever took off. But I tell you what, it was fun to see, because they were these restrictor plate long vehicles. They had restrictor plates on them, and they rode around Charlotte in a pack. They were drafting with one another. They were full throttle all the way around there. And who knows, they might be full throttle all the way around in the All-Star race. But anyway, the Thunder cars were pretty cool to watch. It was like watching, a Daytona race on that scale. There was a huge crash at the end, and I remember one got airborne and rolled through the Charlotte infield. But I never heard of a Thunder car after that. I don't know whatever happened to the Thunder cars. But I don't know what to expect from the Charlotte restrictor plate racing. I hope it's good. I think it might be good. And you know what? If it is good, and it does work out, and it makes the All-Star race very exciting, which for the last couple of years, the All-Star race hasn't been that exciting. Maybe implementing restrictor plates on mile and a halves becomes the new norm. tracks like Texas, Atlanta, Charlotte, those designs, maybe it can make the racing a little more exciting. I don't know. Anything to make the racing more exciting. I know that's why they're doing it. They want the All-Star race to become watchable again. The restrictor plate's a good idea, but if it was me, I would just tell every driver that they had a quota to fill. Every driver had to go out and hit at least another car. Every driver. I'd be like, okay, every person in this race today, you have a quota to fill. You will get a DNF unless you go out there and hit at least one other car. And maybe that would make that exciting. Anyway, let's take a look at the top 10 finishers of the KC Masterpiece 400. From the Kansas Speedway, Kevin Harvick would get the win after starting from the pole. Martin Truex Jr. would finish second. He was not happy with his car all race long, but he would still come away with a second place finish because of the pit strategy. Joey Logano would do the same. He would finish third. Kyle Larson, even though Ryan Blaney ran all into his ass, Kyle Larson would still battle back, and he would finish fourth. And he would definitely be the highest finishing Chevy in the race. Denny Hamlin would finish fifth. Paul Menard, good run for him. He'd finish sixth. Eric Jones was needing just to finish the race. He'd finish seventh. Great run for him. That's going to boost that team for sure. Kurt Busch would finish eighth. Eric Almirola, after having a serious injury at this race last year, would come back to finish ninth. And Kyle Busch, who started third, would finish 10th. Not the night I was expecting from him. In fact, in my fantasy, I picked him to win. He never got anywhere near it. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would finish 11th. Chase Elliott would finish 12th. Those two guys kind of got into it on pit road a little bit there. Ricky Stenhouse cut Chase Elliott off, and Chase Elliott was not happy about that after the race. David Reagan, excellent run in that number 38. He'd finish 13th. Brad Keselowski would finish 14th. Not a good race for him. He would have a loose wheel and go a lap down. That would be the cause of that problem. Clint Boyer, the Kansas home kid, he wants to win that race bad, and he just can't seem to get it done. He would finish 15th. AJ Allmendinger, the Danger, would finish 16th. Austin Dillon would be 17th. And then you get down to some other Hendrick cars here. 18th, Alex Bowman. 19th, Jimmy Johnson, who just struggled all night long. What a miserable race it was for seven-time champion Jimmy Johnson. And finishing 20th, great run for him. Michael McDowell in that number 34 would finish in 20th position. I have a feeling, though, that Kevin Harvick is going to win the month of May. And if you just look at the races, Charlotte basically being the last two races of the month, a track that Kevin Harvick has won at numerous times. And I think he could win the 600, although we have seen some weird winners in that race before. But Kevin Harvick, he might win the rest of the month. But Matt Kenseth was back in the car. He was in the number 6, and he's got his work cut out for him, man. I do not envy him the task that he's got ahead of him. I mean, you could see that the problems with that car were not related to Trevor Bayne. Because Kenseth, he couldn't get much out of that car or the team. And he's a champion driver, and, he's got a lot of skills. So it's actually pretty good to put him in that car, because it wasn't all Trevor Bayne. Even Kenseth was struggling. But, if anyone can whip a team into shape and mold that team, it's him. He's a leader, and he's got experience that Bayne may not have to push that team in the right direction. Bayne might not just know how to lead that team to be a winning team like Matt Kenseth will. Matt Kenseth can give them solid feedback that they need to make that car better. And that's basically his job. Kenseth will be in the car at the 600 as well. But Kenseth, he finished 36th after starting 35th. So not a great return, but not necessarily his fault either. That's his job. His job is to be there to help that team become a winning team again on Roush. So the road to the Indy 500 got underway this weekend with the Indy Grand Prix racing on the road course portion of the racetrack. Hell of an opening lap, though. Pagano and King tangled in the first corner. Jordan King wouldn't be able to continue, so he'd be out of the race in turn 2. And Spencer Pigot would launch in the air after he got over the curve, and those cars are impossible to drive while they're in the air. So when that car landed, he spun and was actually going backwards down the backstretch there. So that was different to see. Will Power would lead them to the green, and he would show the way all the way to lap 20 when he'd come to pit road with second place Robert Wickens. Alexander Rossi, he would stay out longer to get the lead. He'd lead some laps. And Robert Wickens would be all over Power and would get in front of Power. He'd be on that push to pass. A few laps later, he'd get in front of Will Power. So that was going to be big because when it cycled back around, Robert Wickens would be in the lead by lap 41. That's when everything cycled around and Wickens was the leader. But he'd done the whole race on the faster red tires and was going to have to do the next stint on the blacks, which is a slower tire one that has less grip. But Power, he actually had done a stint on the blacks, which was part of the reason why he lost the lead to Wickens. So that meant that he could do the rest of the race on the red. So when Will Power would have some ground to make up, but by lap 51, he'd pass Robert Wickens as he was on the reds and Wickens was on the blacks. On the front stretch, he'd get back to the lead of the Grand Prix. Lap 55, Newgarden and Sebastian Bourdais were having some good racing for third when Newgarden would get up on the curve and he'd spin the car out, losing all of that work for third place. That would put him all the way back in the 20s. And that would make this a whole new race, though, up front. Wickens was now able to come into the pits, get back on the red tires, and then be right behind Will Power to battle with him when the restart came. And I was looking forward to that fight. With 24 laps to go, the race was back on with Will Power in the lead. But it would be Scott Dixon, who had come from nowhere to get near the top. Hadn't heard about him all race long, and then all of a sudden he's there in the top three. He would get around Robert Wickens, and he would set his sights on Will Power, but Will Power, for the third time in 5 years at the Indy Car Grand Prix, he would hang on to win it over Scott Dixon, who started in 10th, and Robert Wickens would finish third. And you know what? That was actually a pretty good one. I don't normally find that I like the Indy Car Grand Prix on the road course portion, but that one was pretty exciting. Especially the middle portion with the battle between Power and Wickens. That was some good stuff. And I was kind of rooting for Wickens there. He's really taken to this IndyCar thing, isn't he? He's a lot of fun to watch, and he's got a big career ahead of him. But Will Power would get the win for Team Penske. And so he's the first one to grab a win at Indy. So the next time we see the Indy Cars race will be the Indy 500. And what did this race give us to look forward to? What did it show us about the Indy 500? Nothing. Because you never know what is going to happen in the Indy 500. In this race, it won't show us anything. It really won't. Also this weekend was the 24 Hours of Nürburgring, and the conditions were absolutely terrible. Horrible. And I missed the first half of the race, but woke up this morning to find it red flagged on account of the fog, which was about lunchtime. When I woke up this morning, it was about lunchtime over there, and there was a thick fog. It looked like it was early morning conditions, but the fact that it was midday and had that much fog was just crazy. And I think it rained through that whole race just about, which Nürburgring is one of the hardest and most difficult tracks in the world, so I couldn't imagine doing 24 hours around there in those types of conditions. But for the first time since 2011, Porsche would take the victory. Manthey Racing picking up the win, that would be the team, and they would do so 26 seconds over Mercedes. The number 4 Mercedes would finish in second place, but you might know some of these names. Two of my favorite Porsche drivers, Patrick Pilet and Nick Tandy, were some of the drivers on that winning team, so congratulations to them for getting a tough job done out there at Nürburgring in the rain for 24 hours of racing. And our friends at SRL had their Russian Grand Prix this weekend. Great race, fantastic to watch, probably one of my favorite races I've seen since I started watching SRL. This one was very good, especially right there at the end. 3 wide racing coming to the finish line. That was fun. Francis McGinn would pick up the win. He'd be in a McLaren. Good to see McLaren winning a race. You know how much I love McLaren, and I haven't seen McLaren win in a while. So thank you, Francis McGinn, for picking up a win in McLaren. Yannick Verpetten would finish second in the Haas, and Nick Van Gelder would finish third for Renault. That would be the podium finishers. Rene van der Stoep, he would finish 4th, and Sandro Doulis would finish in 5th. Great race for him. That would be our top 5 drivers in the Russian Grand Prix for SRL. But yo, Francis McGinn, he did not make a qualifying start. He started last on the grid and climbed his way through the field to win the damn race. A Kevin Harvick level of driving. So Francis McGinn, sir, if you're listening to this, that was no bull. That was no bull. And that makes you the no bull driver of the race, my friend. Bart Cadelda is still the point leader by a huge margin, and the big news this week was that Bart Cadelda will not be back for Season 4 in SRL. So who will win that championship next season? I think that's really going to shake things up. So that'll be fun to watch there and see who comes away with that one. But it won't be Bart Cadelda. And lastly, F1 was in Spain for some racing with threatening skies too, but the rain stayed away and we got a full dry race in. Lewis Hamilton was on pole, and you know, the pole sitter normally wins this one. Plus, it's beginning to look like Mercedes has found that little bit they were missing at the start of the season. Hamilton was in a league all on his own at the start of the race, but trouble would strike on the very first lap. Grosjean would check up and get kind of loose, trying to miss a car that actually got loose in front of him. I was having to watch the race in another language, so I could not tell who that was that got loose in front of him based on the replay. But Grosjean would spin and he would collect Gasly and Hülkenberg. The race would restart with Hamilton pulling out to a huge lead again. It was like 19 seconds, I think. But what was cool, he and his teammate Valtteri Bottas kept breaking the lap record. Every few laps, one of them would set a new fastest lap, and then the other would come along and beat it. So that was really fun to watch there for a while, and I was having a laugh over that. The lap times, too, got down in the 1:17 range, so these guys were flying around this track. It was a very fast race, much like the Kansas race. It was a quick one. It just seemed like it was over with and done in no time. So Mercedes has found that pace, which should scare the other guys a tad. It certainly scares me as a fan. Raikkonen would have car trouble, so he'd drop out of the race. Esteban Ocon would get a DNF, as well as Van Dorn in the McLaren. But Lewis Hamilton would win his second race in a row. He found his stride. He certainly found his stride, and he would win 20 seconds over his teammate Valtteri Bottas. Max Verstappen, he would not run into anything this week. That's right, Max Verstappen didn't hit anything, and he finished third. That would be your podium finishers for the Spanish Grand Prix. The rest of the points positions, Vettel would be fourth, Ricciardo fifth, Kevin Magnussen for Haas would finish in sixth, hometown hero Carlos Sainz, he would finish seventh, Alonso would finish eighth, Perez ninth, and Leclerc would finish in 10th. So great run for him. Reminded me, though, this race, it reminded me of an F1 race we've been used to seeing for the last couple of years. Hamilton gets the pole, leads the whole thing, wins it by like an hour. If Hamilton and Mercedes are truly back, this might be a trend that we'll get used to seeing here over the next couple of races. Hamilton is leading the points, 17 points over Vettel. Bottas is in third, and Mercedes is at the top of the constructors. A pretty hefty size over Ferrari in that one too. So Mercedes back on top. Back on top. They had a rough little bit of it right there at the beginning of the season, but they are certainly back in winning form. Good battle, though, between McLaren and Renault in the points. Renault leading just 1 point over McLaren in fourth, and Haas is in sixth, 1 point over Force India. So the midfield has a lot of excitement going on there in the midfield. But the next F1 race will be from Monaco. The greatest day of racing, right? You have Monaco in the morning, Indy 500 in the afternoon, and the Coke 600 at night. Best day of racing for Memorial Day. So Monaco, the streets of Monaco will be next in Formula One. That's 2 weeks away. But thank you so much. That was everything that happened in racing. Busy weekend for racing, was it not? Lots going on there. Kevin Harvick picking up the win in NASCAR. Will Power picking up the win in IndyCar. You had Porsche winning in the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. Some good fun SRL sim racing going on. Francis McGinn picking up that win. And Lewis Hamilton winning 2 in a row. And man, I wonder what Ferrari is thinking now. Did they think that they could go the rest of the year? Well, they'll have to respond. Can Ferrari respond to Mercedes? We'll just have to wait and see. Thank you so much for listening. This has been The Recap. I'm Justin with NRN, the No Bull Racing Network, and we will see you next time after the All-Star race. Take it easy.